So when one of history's most notorious serial killers considers you his best friend, what do? Try real damn hard to stay on his good side, because getting unfriended by that fucker has dire consequences. No Man of God is brought to us by director Amber Seeley and stars Elijah Wood, Luke Kirby, and Robert T-1000 Patrick. You'll always be the T-1000 to me, Robert. So this is the 473rd movie about Ted Bundy that we've gotten in the past few years. However, this one takes a little bit of a different approach and focuses on young FBI agent Bill Hagmaier, played by Elijah Wood. For those of you that didn't know, which is pretty much everybody, that's why this movie got made, Bill Hagmaier was the FBI agent who eventually got Bundy to confess to all the things that he did. Or at least most of what he did. Whether or not he actually was honest about everyone that he killed is still up for debate today. But the closure that the vast majority of Bundy's victims' families got was due to the work that Hagmaier did. Bundy was notorious for either just not talking to officials at all, or when he did, just pretty much fucking with them. He would make them think that he was going to tell them something and just like never talk to them again and leave them just wondering what it was he was going to say for years to come. But Bill Hagmaier was a bit different. He spent years going and talking to Bundy through letters and in person and all that. And the main thing that he did different is that he approached it from not trying to get answers from Bundy, but trying to understand him. Apparently, this is something that Bundy appreciated. This guy wasn't coming in trying to like break a big case and get a book deal and get higher up in the agency or anything. He just wanted to talk to the guy and get to know him. But the vast majority of the time that they talk, Bundy never actually tells him anything concretely. He alludes to things, and Hagmaier himself says, and we see that Bundy wants him to know, yeah, I did these things, but I'm not going to admit to it. Bundy prided himself on being real smart and the fact that nobody was able to pin any of this stuff on him. I mean, he's in prison and on death row, so yeah, he was convicted of one single murder of a young girl, but all the other ones he did, nobody could get any concrete evidence on it. They all kind of knew he did it, and he liked to let people know, you know what, I know that you know that I did it, but I'm not going to admit to it, and there's not shit you can do about it. Now, I'm not giving anything away with the story, letting you know that Bundy does eventually confess at least some of his crimes to Hagmaier. The movie more or less tells you that in the beginning of the film, and if you didn't get it there, the trailer just lays it all out for you. And history tells us that anyway. We know that Bundy was executed for his crimes. We also know that right before he was executed, he did finally confess to a slew of the murders. Whether he did or did not commit these crimes, and whether Hagmaier is able to coax a confession out of him or not, is not the story here. Much like Hagmaier, the movie is more interested in knowing why he did it, knowing more about Bundy. What was going on in his mind? And I did like this approach. It was a bit fresh. The movie does present Bundy as a very likable, charismatic person, and I don't fault it for that because it is well known that in real life, that's what Bundy was. He was very likable and very charismatic. That's how he got away with so many of the crimes that he did. I would usually fault a movie for taking a real life murderer and making them likable, but that was part of what Bundy was. Something else the movie also did a really good job of is reminding you every now and then that this is a monster we're dealing with. While he is a very likable and charismatic guy, every now and then you will see his tone suddenly change. You'll see the mask come off and the monster underneath for a few seconds. And the movie did a really good job of presenting that to us, letting us see, holy shit, that guy that I've kind of liked for the past 30 minutes, there's the real guy behind the mask. That's the fucking evil demon that I've always heard about. And one of the main things that sold this version of Bundy to us was Luke Kirby as Ted Bundy. This guy was great as Ted Bundy. He was extremely likable, very charismatic, somebody that you would want to get to know. And on the flip side of that, he was absolutely fucking terrifying. And he also really looks like the real life Ted Bundy. Out of all the different versions of Ted Bundy that we've gotten on the screen over the years, Kirby's version is absolutely the most believable. He does a fantastic job here. You believe through and through that that is fucking Ted Bundy on the other side of the screen. It doesn't hurt that the material he's working with is pretty good as well. And a big part of that is probably because a lot of the dialogue is brought directly from the transcripts of these media meetings these two had. These are Bundy's actual words in a lot of cases, and that kind of makes it all the more eerie. Elijah Wood also turns in a great performance as Bill Hagmaier, however, he doesn't have quite as much to work with. Now, his character does have some depth. He's not like shallow or anything, but he's nowhere near as meaty as Bundy. The movie does show us that this time with Bundy, all these years that he spends thinking about Bundy and spending time with him, does start to weigh on the man. I do wish the movie had done a little bit better job of showing this. We do get a little bit. We get a few scenes where apparently Bundy has gotten into his head, but I never felt like they went far enough. It was more of a side note. It's like they wanted to do it, but they didn't fully commit. And while interesting, since they didn't fully commit to that subplot, whenever it was going on, I just wanted them to get back to the stuff with Bundy. Had they taken it that extra mile, spent a little bit more time, and really committed to it and shown us the mental turmoil that this man actually went through in real life, I would have found it more interesting and thought it had a place in the film. As it stands right here, while it doesn't take up a lot of screen time, really, it's kind of wasted. Overall, this is a very well acted film. Everybody does great, but Wood and Kirby do stand above the rest, but that kind of makes sense because a lot of the screen time is devoted to these two. This is their story after all. Now, while I did enjoy this film and find a lot of it pretty fascinating, overall, it just didn't offer much that we don't already know. The biggest thing that it offers is the whole unsung hero Bill Hagmaier and how he got all this stuff out of Bundy. I mean, it's common knowledge that he confessed, we just didn't know what lengths they had to go and how long it took them to get him to do it. And while that is neat, beyond just being told that, hey, this guy right here that Elijah Wood's playing, Bill Hagmaier, he went and talked to him all this time and got him to confess, there's just not much more we get. I mean, everything that's said to Bill Hagmaier, we already know. It's already been put out there, and it's been in other films. Hagmaier's character may not have been a part of those other films, but we already know what it was he found out. There's nothing about his character and this story that adds to what we know. And that is disappointing because this is a really well-made film. It's not the film's fault that we all have such a knowledge of these events. It's just that there's been so many other screen adaptations of what Bundy did that there's nothing more here that the movie can tell us. I mean, nothing more that the trailer doesn't tell us, that this guy, he's the one that coaxed it out of him. Beyond that, there's nothing new here. And I do hate to knock the movie for that, but it is what it is. This movie just didn't present me with anything I didn't know, and while I wasn't bored, I did find myself getting a bit antsy at times. Thankfully, though, it did have the fantastic performances from Wood and Kirby that kept me interested, because if it wasn't for those, I probably would have ended up getting bored. Guys, No Man of God is a really solidly made film that we already know everything about. It doesn't really offer anything that we didn't already know, and what it could have offered about Hagmaier's character, it doesn't want to fully commit. It does, however, feature some really great performances from our two leads, and Kirby as Ted Bundy is the best version of Ted Bundy I've ever seen on screen. It also tells a compelling story about an interesting real-life character regardless of how evil he was. And even though that compelling story doesn't really tell us much we didn't already know, No Man of God is still absolutely worth a rent.
All he wanted was this.
To return some videotape.
This was a tough movie for me to review because while I did really like it, it was more or less pretty much the same story I've already seen. And while it was a better version of that story that I've already seen, I have already seen it about 30 times. Either way, if you're looking for a compelling, if not pretty familiar, real-life story about a serial killer, then check out No Man of God, and I think you'll have a pretty enjoyable time with it. So there it is, guys, my review of No Man of God. If you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you want to help out the channel, check out my Patreon in the description below and become a jarhead and get some of the awesome benefits that go along with that, like these guys. And possibly join my top tier and become a bad motherfucker like my man Greg. If you liked what I had to say, give me a like. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, stay sexy, Jacksonville.
I'm going to take you somewhere that I've never taken anyone before.
Something else about this movie that was pretty good and did kind of resonate with me was that it showed a lot of like real life news footage and like stuff from the people outside of the prison when leading up to Bundy's execution and when he was executed. It also showed like news broadcasts of when he was killed. All of that really gave it this sense of realism to me. Like the whole thing with like Bryant Gumbel, if any of you remember who the fuck Bryant Gumbel was, I don't even know if he's still on TV, but whatever. Bryant Gumbel, he like announced on TV that Ted Bundy had been executed, and that just really made it real to me, mainly because I remember that broadcast specifically. I remember Bryant Gumbel coming on whatever news station he was on and saying Ted Bundy has been executed. Yes, that's right. I remember when Ted Bundy was executed. I was young, but I do vividly remember the time leading up to him being executed, and I do remember when he was executed. Yep, that old.